whole area, it's very, 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 very remiss of me not to have come down here before, because my daughter's a big Joyce fan, works in the James Joyce Centre in Dublin, and I knew of this place. I knew of the 40 foot. It's like a little paradise down here. It's just stunning. But more importantly, it is a great kind of pilgrimage for Joyce fans. And I was reading up on the book, and there we are. I know he was inspired by Charles Lamb's Adventure of Ulysses, a little children's book. In 1906, I think he started what was going to be a story, and then the following year it was a short book, and then before you know it, it's one of the biggest, kind of most celebrated books. Do you think there was a moment when he sort of thought to himself, okay, this is going to be something beyond the norm, this is going to rip a new one in the world of literature? Or did he think like that when he created Ulysses?
I've no idea what he was thinking when he started first. There's a lot of correspondence between himself, particularly, and his brother Stanislaus in relation to Ulysses, which was meant to be a short story about this chap Alfred Hunter, who had helped Joyce when he had approached a girl at one stage, and the girl, who wasn't on her own, but Joyce didn't know it, and Joyce got a couple of little smacks around the face and was in a little bit of a mess. And this Alfred Hunter, who was a Jew, and who brought him home and tidied him up and sent him home. And this is exactly what Leopold Bloom, of course, did with Stephen Dedalus.
Right.
So it was to be a short story, and I've really no idea when it began to blossom in his mind into being something a lot bigger than that.
But do you think he was aware of his, we'll say, we were talking before, and it was, for some people this is jazz multiplied by 100. It's such an ambitious, wild kind of it seems to be sort of improvised, and whether he was sort of aware of, he was mischief, or whether he was, really, really kind of aware of the fact that this was going to be somewhat of a conundrum for a lot of people. This is going to be something that broke the rules. Do you think he thought like that, or? Oh,
he did. Well, first of all, Joyce from a very early age was aware of his own genius, and he had often said, in fact, to his own family, that they'd been at a play when he was quite young, and the play was about genius breaking out in a family situation, and he was quoted as saying to his parents on the way home, this is about genius breaking out in and around the household, and it's going to happen here too, so be ready for it. And this was a very young Joyce, so he was well aware of it, and he liked to tease people. He was a great practical joker, great fun. Unless you're at the butt end of a practical joke, sometimes it's not so funny. And I mean, at the beginning of my show, I quote a piece that, in fact, that he said in an interview once, talking about the book Ulysses, and he said that apart from the fact that it is not a serious book, which is the main part of what I say in the show, this is a book about fun, about sending up Irish sacred cows, and he sends them up absolutely brilliantly. But he says that but I've put so many enigmas and puzzles into it that it will keep the professors busy for centuries arguing over what I meant. And I think he said that with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, but he meant it.
Right.
So it's kind of two different books. It's a book that the average person can pick up and with a little bit of hand-holding can get through it and really enjoy it. But it's also a book that if you want to get really stuck in and analyse every sentence, every word in it, there is a meaning for every single word in that book.
Well, his line too, that there's not a serious line in the book, that he's sort of playing with the idea that, and John Lennon would have been the same. He loved throwing out, kind of Dylan-esque lyrics that he knew people wouldn't be able to, because he himself didn't have any explanation for it, but it was enough to say 8 feet small and let people try to figure out what did I say that for. And so I'm guessing Joyce must have, once it did actually land and that it became the book that it is, I'm sure he was, I don't know, was he taken aback by just how wonderful the book became in people's minds, or because we're talking about 100 years later and it's still that book.
It's still regarded throughout the world as possibly the greatest novel ever written, certainly the greatest novel of the 20th century. Right. And considering it was published back in 1922, it's almost 100 years old now, and it still holds that position quite strongly and vehemently. That Joyce knew he was producing something of absolute genius. He knew it all along. I think he was quite disappointed when it came out. The sales weren't brilliant.
Right.
And he even collaborated with people like Stuart Gilbert to bring out explanatory booklets on what the book was all about. He really did expect that all English-speaking people would be in a position and would be reading his great novel of genius. And particularly, I presume he expected that Irish people would. And I think there was quite a disappointment when he realised that that really wasn't happening and never happened.
Because I was going to say, I should know my Joyce history. I wondered, did he live to sort of see this kind of blossoming of his Bloomsday?
No, he lived to become recognised as one of the greatest writers of his time. And he did that because he was recognised shortly after 1922. I mean, I think he was on the front of Vanity Fair. He was on the front of Time magazine. You know, and you don't get in there unless you're pretty good. Yeah. So he would have realised that all right. But he became so preoccupied very shortly after Ulysses was published in 1922 for writing his great book of genius, Finnegan's Wake.
Right.
Which took him, well, from 1922, 23 to 1939 to write. So he became so absorbed in that.
Do you think part of the appeal is the fact that, you know, here's probably, you know, the most celebrated book of the last 100 years. It's seen as a masterpiece, and yet there's about 214 people have read it right through.
Absolutely.
Is that part of the appeal? Because
214 people admit they've read it.
It's almost like a Mount Everest. It's almost like, you know, there is a challenge in there, and people like the idea of even starting the climb feels like I'm going to go for this. But the idea that it for a lot of people it's just too dense and too confusing to get through.
It's far too difficult to get into, and I mean the kind of the difficult aspects or the most ingenious aspects of Ulysses don't really start until halfway through the book. And I've always felt that I think it was in Terence Colleen's book on Ulysses, he said a beautiful statement that the aeroplane of Ulysses is slowly but surely going down the runway up until the time he goes into the Ormond Hotel, the Sirens episode, and then that plane takes off.
Right.
And then the real genius of how Joyce plays with everything comes out. So, technically speaking, the earlier episodes of Ulysses should have been easier to deal with than some of the later stuff.
Right.
And particularly the very first one, which takes place here at the Martello Tower in Sandycove. It should have been. But a problem with it is that people, even who are used to reading a lot of novels, a lot of English poetry and novels, they're thrown into an aspect of English writing that they would not be familiar with most of the time. And that is the idea of being put directly into somebody's head and their thoughts at the instant that they think it, regardless of it being narrative or dialogue or whatever. You are inside Stephen Dedalus and Leopold Bloom's head, the two main characters, for an enormous amount of the novel. But Joyce never lets you know when you're in there. So, as Bloom is walking along, as Stephen is strolling along Sandycove Strand, thoughts come in and they're thrown right in the middle of the narrative, which of course makes the sentences not make sense anymore.
Right.
Because you're getting actually two sentences for the price of one almost. And some of these thoughts would be one word or a whole sentence. And even as Stephen Dedalus, he imagines other things happening to him in his thoughts. So another story starts up in the middle of the narrative that's there, that actually isn't even a story going on in Ulysses, but a story going on in Stephen Dedalus' head. So what happens then really is that Ulysses becomes, for most people, a work that you have to study, and you can't just read it.
Right.
And for most people, understandably, who want to get some entertainment out of what they're reading, after 20 or 30 pages, they've just decided, sod this is making no sense, and it's not worth the effort.
And the one big thing about entertainment and any kind of art is if people feel stupid, they just feel it's obviously not a nice feeling that I don't understand this, and it's so much easier to, especially with a book when nobody's around. It's not like walking out of a cinema. I'm just going to put the book down and do something else. And that would be a constant, I think, in art, that there's this sense of, you know, if the audience or the reader doesn't quite feel like they're up to the job, it's a very easy thing to step away.
When you're reading along and you're kind of getting it, and then suddenly you get a sentence or two that make no sense, the first thing you think about is, God, have I missed something? I better go back over the few pages, because I don't understand what he's saying here, and I must have missed a sentence. And the fact is that they haven't missed a sentence. This is just the way Joyce wrote it. It is absolute genius the way he managed to do it. But had he introduced a little more punctuation, he was not a fan of punctuation in general, and of course, having lived on the continent for most of his life, continental people don't tend to use as much punctuation, I think, as we do in England and Ireland and that sort of thing. And had he done that, he would have, I think, brought more people with him. And then when his writing became more complex, they would have been with him, and they would have continued on.
Right.
You know, and that's my own humble opinion on this.
So was there a point in your life where you know, this bitch's brew of a novel took hold of because you kind of explored this book in many ways, and you've done a revision of it, and obviously we'll get on to the fact that you've got Strolling Through Ulysses, but was it, I don't know if it was school days, whether it was later in life?
It was before I did my leaving cert, believe it or not.
All right.
I was very, very interested in English literature. I'd even read many of the Shakespearean plays that weren't on the Leaving Cert course, and people don't do that at Leaving Cert. You just put the head down, get through your exams. I was reading all sorts of stuff everywhere, and of course I'd heard about Ulysses, and I'd give it a go, and I read it, and I read it straight through. I probably understood about a third of it.
Right.
But just the beauty of the language at times, it's almost things like poetry. You'd read some of Yeats, or you'd read some of Seamus Heaney's poetry, and you wouldn't really know what they're getting at some of the time, but just some of the sentences describing something going on, and just, that's beautiful. It's just gorgeous. So I kind of read it, about 17 or 18 years of age. So
taking that leap, first we'll deal with the book which you have here with you now. That was quite a gargantuan undertaking to say, okay, I'm going to so take a look at this book, and I'm going to, you know, remaster and so how did that come about, or when did that happen?
Oh, I think an episode of lunacy in my life. It was a very good friend of mine who's a master linguist down in County Mayo, and I was speaking with him one day, and of course Ulysses comes up a bit because we talk about various things, and he kind of said, I got about 30 pages into the book, and I didn't know who was talking and what the hell was going on, and I put it down, and I kind of said, look, if I take the first episode and I retype it out in such a way that you're aware of when you're inside the various characters' heads, and you're also put inverted commas instead of a dash in relation to the dialogues, that makes it more comfortable to read, visually more comfortable. Yeah. We'll see how you got on with that. Is that okay? He said, game ball, do that. And as I actually started to do that, I kind of thought, well, you know, this whole book needs this.
Right.
Without touching the integrity of the book, without changing a single syllable from where Joyce put it, or even correcting some of the obvious mistakes that have been agreed by the Joycean community are mistakes Joyce made. Leave it all in, that's what he wrote. Right. But just mainly taking the internal monologue, the stream of consciousness, and every time you come through the book, have it in italics.
Right.
Leave it where it is. So somebody reading a sentence suddenly sees 2 words in italic or 20 words in italic, they suddenly know these don't basically form part of the original sentence of narrative or dialogue. This is Bloom thinking as he's talking, or thinking as he's walking along, and it just makes it a little bit easier. And that's why I did it. We
should get on to Strolling is coming to Greystones. This is a show that you've been doing this for a few years now. It's got a very, very good reputation in Dublin.
Yeah, I know
that as my daughter now talks highly of it and says that it seems to, you know, really work with people. I mean, how did that evolve? Where did that come from?
It evolved out of this book again to a certain extent. As I was getting towards the end of this, feeling, well, I've now something that I can tell people. You will now be able to get through Ulysses. It'll be an effort still. It's like a walk in the park, but you will get through it and enjoy it. And I kind of thought then, wouldn't it be lovely to be able to stand up and just tell people about it? So I started writing out. I did one show where I had a couple of people in it, the Bloomsday Story I called it, and it was great fun, about kind of Joyce explaining to a certain extent certain aspects of the book, and then a narrator explaining bits and pieces more of it, and then characterising some of the parts and reading parts out of it to illustrate where Joyce's complexity, where his beauty is, and all this sort of thing. So that was starting first, but that was turning into a financial, economic disaster. It never worked. So eventually I said, damn it, I wonder will something work as a one-man show. And it took me a long time to write it, because it was about 2.5 hours long when I had originally written it. So by cutting it and cutting it and cutting it and cutting it, I got it down to about 75-80 minutes, where it's as if you get a crowd around you in a pub or in anywhere and say, lads, I'm going to tell you over the next 75 minutes exactly what happens in Ulysses. And I will illustrate how funny so much of it is, and I'll also illustrate the beauty of Joyce's writing, some complex little bits I throw in to let you know that. Also a few of the bawdier aspects, shall I say. First of all, there's quite a few of them in Ulysses. But the interesting thing about the way Joyce handled it, because he wrote it, he took all the body aspects of the book as being bodily functions, but he did it in a very ordinary way. He would talk about a bodily function the way he would talk about Bloom drinking his glass of wine and Davy Byrne. This is what Bloom did during the day. This is what Molly was thinking. No sensationalising of it, and I don't sensationalise it either. But I bring it in mainly to illustrate also, these are some of the reasons the book is so controversial. Because, you know, a lot of people wonder, why was it so controversial worldwide when it came out first?
Right.
So I put some of this stuff in, but it's harmless.
I suppose just to wrap up, ultimately I think it's a book about Greystones, because you just mentioned Greystones, and it's very important for people in Greystones to believe that we are the main inspiration.
Absolutely.
So it's really about that one sentence, really. It's
in
just
Greystones and in every other part of the world. I think it is the book about them. But he does put Greystones into it, about Molly having to cancel a show she was doing at the Greystones Regatta because she was pregnant with Rudy, the son who didn't survive.
It's true. It's all about us.
And,
it's all about us.
The Greystones Regatta at that particular time missed out badly on Molly coming out to sing out there.
It was the inspiration. It was what started the book, I'm sure of it.
Oh, no doubt. He went down to Greystones and said, "This is a regatta that Molly would have been at. So let's work from there backwards."
Yeah, backwards and outwards. Yeah.